It's Ron Wexler with the Wexler Group at Keller Williams Preferred Realty. Today we're going to talk about an interesting topic. How does a smart seller deal with a lowball offer? So when a seller gets a lowball offer, it's really important to respond, not react. You know, it's really interesting because I'll see the offer before my seller does. So a lot of times I'll see the offer and I'll have the same kind of reaction somebody might have, which is, are they kidding me? Did they even see this house? What is their thought process, or who taught them how to negotiate? It's kind of interesting. So then I'll call my seller and kind of prep them and say, before I even tell you the price, I'm telling you it's low, and that's okay, because having a contract in front of us is better than not having a contract in front of us. And people negotiate different ways. So, we can react and be a little annoyed, but really let's decide how we're going to respond. That's how we're going to maximize what we walk away with. So, an offer is made up of several parts. There's the price, which of course tends to be number one on the list, but there's also other terms. When do they want to close? When do they want possession? Are they cash, or are we going to be subject to a loan that needs an appraisal? Are they asking for a home inspection or repairs? What personal property are they asking us to leave behind? There's a lot of factors that go into a contract. And often when an offer comes in, my theory is you go through all the terms and then you decide how you're going to respond to all of them. And don't get hung up on a low offer that it can really take you out of the positive mindset and the fun of selling your home, because it's sometimes insultingly low is what I call it. And at the same time, different people learn to negotiate different ways. And so, consider sometimes you're working with people who, they literally learned how to negotiate for everything. Like, you go to the grocery store and whatever price the apples are, that's what you pay. There's people who, when they go to the market to buy an apple, they negotiate to buy that apple. And it's part of the fun and the good faith and everything else. Well, sometimes they'll bring that mindset to buying a house. And if you have a different set of not even values, but a different way of seeing things, then you might be insulted, where they think it's just the opening offer and they think they're being amazing by making you an offer at all. And you have to get past really having a reaction to it and just be okay with any offer on paper is an offer. And we love having offers. We can't negotiate if there's no one to negotiate with. So I'm perfectly fine if they come in low. I get past that initial reaction of, are you kidding me? And then move towards, how are we going to put this together? Is this a buyer we want to work with? And then how do we work with all the various terms that buyer has put into the contract? What else might be a deal killer besides the price? And we kind of deal with them one at a time. So, one thing that's been very interesting for me doing this over 40 years is sometimes the offer comes in really low and you counter, and we tend to counter higher because we think that they want to go back and forth and back and forth. So a lot of times we won't come down at all. We'll just decide what we're going to do with all their other terms. And then we'll just stay with our asking price and let them come back at a higher number. Sometimes we'll come down just a little bit, like we would have for a buyer who came in closer. So if a buyer offered 95% of our asking price, we might have countered back at 98 or 99 anyhow. So we'll do the same thing for a buyer that comes in at 80% of our asking price. Just come down 1% or 1.5%, whatever you feel comfortable with, and then see how they respond to that. So it's just a calm response. I don't call the agent and say, what are you guys smoking over there? Or what's going on in your head? I'll just respond the same way I would have responded to a really strong offer. Just respond the same way. It's okay. If you don't buy it, we're okay with that. We lose if we're attached to the outcome. So we go into it being okay with losing the buyer and getting our terms from this buyer or the next one. We don't have to have a strong reaction. We just have to have a correct response that meets our needs. So here's the other thing. Let's say that buyer offered us 85% of our asking price and we know we're going to sell within 4% of our asking price. It doesn't really matter how far below the 4% they went, we're still not coming down any further. So it's perfectly okay. And if that buyer really thinks they're going to buy the house for 80 or 85% of the asking price, then they're not our buyer anyhow. And so they don't get to set our mood, and they don't get to affect how we respond to the next offer we get either. We just deal with that buyer, directly and strong, and with really sticking to our guns. I always say it's like when we're playing hardball, right? And that's why people hire me. That's why people hire the Wexler Group. We have no problem playing hardball with the other side. We work for our seller. And so it's okay if we have to go back strong, we go back strong. And if the buyer goes away, they go away. In this market, if we're doing our job and marketing the right way, we're going to have multiple offers, or we're going to find another buyer soon anyhow. So it's okay not to be attached to a buyer until they get to our terms that we're happy with. Then we can really like that buyer and want them to own our house. There's different kinds of negotiating, and it really is almost regional the way people negotiate. And sometimes people, no matter where they start, they enter negotiations with the idea that they're going to come to a conclusion. And in some cultures, they're not used to you walking away ever. They think as long as they're making an offer and coming back at you, that you will continue to come back to them. So sometimes we just have to be strong and be okay with saying to the other side, listen, there's really no reason for you to counter again. These are the absolute best terms that we are willing to give your buyer. We'd really like your buyer to buy our home, but if these terms don't work, it's perfectly fine. Hopefully they can come back, they can see a few more homes, then they'll realize that ours is a good home at this price and come back to us. But otherwise, we're not going to be negotiating any further. So if you just let your buyer know that, we really appreciate their offer. We hope to make something happen, and maybe they can come back later if they're willing to pay our price. And you just let it go at that. It's really okay to let that buyer go. And I know it's all highly emotional, and there's a lot of energy that goes into it. That's why you hire a professional. Like, you can feel the feelings, have the emotions, do everything else, and let us do the negotiating and work to get you the top price without any emotion at all. So, in sales, they teach something called the takeaway close. And the takeaway close is basically when you say, we're done, no thank you, we don't want to work with you. And it makes the other person suddenly feel some loss. So they actually will start negotiating against themselves. And that's really what happens when you get to the point where you're done. You really want to be clear about that. Very clear, and just say to the other side, we really wanted to work with you. This is just the best we can do. And we hope you'll go with this price, but we understand if it doesn't work for you. And sometimes that will cause that buyer to have a sudden sense of loss. And that at that point, they will reevaluate their position. And often a buyer who we think we're so far apart, this is never going to happen, that buyer suddenly says, okay, and they buy the house. So it's okay to be strong and to not be attached to the outcome, and to just be strong about your price. If you're priced where you belong, you will get a buyer at your price or really close to it. And there's just no reason to feel upset or, just frustrated or anything else. If that particular buyer is negotiating the way that buyer negotiates, if it doesn't work for him and it doesn't work for us, then that's okay. We can part ways friends and go find someone else. So in conclusion, when you get a lowball offer, take a deep breath, decide what you want, because it's your house and you're not obligated to anything. Decide what you want, let your professional do their job and negotiate that buyer up as high as they can possibly get that buyer. And if that's a number that you're happy with, that's great, you have a deal. And if it's not, then we move on and go find the next one. A lowball offer really isn't a lowball offer. It's just where that buyer felt like they should start. If you found this video helpful, please hit the like button or subscribe so we know where to find you in the future as we create more content about the real estate world. And we appreciate you being here through this video today. and we'll see you on the next one.